Hello and welcome to Global with me, Matthew Amreliwala, live from London. A day of funerals in a country shaken by the most deadly terror attacks in their history. Turkey's Prime Minister points the finger at Islamic State.
There is now an urgent need for the government to reassure people by finding who was responsible. A profoundly shaken country craves answers.
Grief is intertwined with anger. How unstable is Turkey with its war on Islamic State, Kurdish militants and far-left groups? Will the country's general election have to be postponed? I'll be looking for answers as we talk to a Kurdish political commentator and a specialist in Turkish politics. The American dentist who shot Cecil the Lion in July is told by the Zimbabwean government there'll be no charges. The British economist Angus Deaton has been awarded the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences. We'll be talking to him live in this programme. And also on Global today, is there a link between poor performance at school and too much time playing video games? We'll look at new research and ask whether games themselves can be used to enhance learning. Hello and welcome to Global with me, Matthew Amreliwala. A day of funerals, a country still reeling and the finger of blame pointed directly at Islamic State. Turkey's Prime Minister said IS was the prime suspect for the double bombing on Saturday that killed at least 97 people. The twin explosions ripped through a crowd of activists gathering to call for an end to the violence between the Turkish government and Kurdish militants, the PKK. NATO's Secretary-General urged Ankara to be proportionate in their response to the weekend's bombing. So what is Turkey's next move? Is this a new flank for Islamic State? And how is the spike in terrorist violence likely to impact on November's elections? Mark Lowen has sent this report.
The mixture of confusion and terror is hard to imagine. New pictures from moments after the twin bombs hit, tearing through a peace rally in Ankara. Most are too graphic to show, but the horror is clear. And this was the moment of impact. A happy, united atmosphere destroyed. At the morgue, forensic tests continue on the bodies of those who died. Families wait outside for news of whether their loved ones are among them. A grim ritual, hoping at least for something to bury. We're told that the remains of 8 of the bodies are still inside the morgue, 2 of them thought to be the suicide bombers. There is now an urgent need for the government to reassure people by finding who was responsible. A profoundly shaken country craves answers. Across the Middle East, there have been years of clashes as Kurds have fought for a homeland. In Turkey, they make up 20% of the population. In the 1980s, some formed the PKK, waging an armed struggle for independence or more autonomy. 40,000 people died over 3 decades. A ceasefire with the PKK broke down in July, and tit-for-tat attacks have soared ever since. Anger still seethes here at what happened. At best, they blame the government for a lack of security. At worst, for something far darker. The PKK says it's ceasing military operations in Turkey, but that's been dismissed by the government, the army reinforcing positions as it continues to pound the PKK from the air. This is the cost of a wider political and regional struggle. How many more such tragedies before all ethnicities here can live together in peace?
Well, that was Mark Lowen reporting. Now, the Turkish Prime Minister has said Islamic State, or Daesh, is the prime suspect in these bombings.
These 3 terrorist organisations are seen as potential suspects for this attack. But when we look at how the attack happened and the general tendency of the events, Daesh has become the primary suspect.
Well, let's talk about the events of the last couple of days. We're joined from Istanbul by Dr. Abbas Vali, here, Kurdish political commentator, and here in the studio by Zeynep, who specialises in Turkish politics at the London School of Economics. Thanks to both of you for being here on today's Global. Let me start with you, Abbas Vali. Your headline thoughts at those events over the weekend and the response we've seen?
I think this must have been a wake-up call for the government to see the consequences of its ultra-nationalist politics, demonization of the Kurdish party and the Kurdish community at large, the political community, and the fact that its conduct since July, letting the various events, its perpetrators of the various events go with impunity, not conducting thorough investigation, and not providing security for political rallies which are organized by the opposition, and sitting, if you like, comfortably in the political process and saying that as far as this violence is not threatening us and our followers, it's not necessary to conduct that kind of investigation.
Well, a number of charges. Let me bring Zeynep in. How much of that analysis do you share? And was it right for Turkey's Prime Minister, after only, 36 hours, to point the finger fairly, straightly and directly at Islamic State?
Partly yes, and partly no. I agree with Professor Vali in terms of how Turkish government has been not thoroughly investigating the previous events. There has been 3 main events just before the elections in Diyarbakir, another one in Suruç at the border of Turkey and Syria, and this is the 3rd one. And the Turkish government blamed IS again for those events. IS has not owned these events, by the way, but the perpetrators are seen as affiliated with IS or trained by the IS. So in a way, the evidence seems to be showing that in their eyes, but we can't just blame one side. There has been a lack of cautious methods that are being implemented in the region. For instance, in this just Saturday's events, the lack of security precautions, it's a matter of question that we need to be look into.
And that is why so many people have been alarmed at the events and asking questions about quite how this happened. Abbas, Vali, should the elections that are due on November the 1st be postponed? Because already the Prime Minister is talking about this attack being part of the whole run-up to those elections.
I think, insofar as I know, and I know the Turkish political scene as an observer, I think no party just at present is asking for the postponement of elections. In fact, they are, in a sense, encouraged by the, if you like, rather weak position that the government has adopted in the last 2 weeks. And they think that any kind of, let's say, context or even excuse to be brought up for postponing elections itself is part of a larger, if you like, plan or process, behind which is the awareness of the failure of the strategy of government since the last 3 months in order to boost its fortunes in the forthcoming elections, because all the reasonably valid and respectable opinion polls shows that the result of the election in November the 1st is not going to be significantly different from the one in early June.
Yes, from only a few months ago. Zeynep, in terms of the strategy towards Syria, interesting, Abbas Vali talking about just that broader initiative, fighting a war on 3 fronts since June, July. But in terms of a strategy on Syria, how confused, how complicated has it now become for the Turkish authorities?
The Syrian civil war itself is very complicated. It's making for any state, it's difficult to make policies. For Turkey, it's particularly complicated because of the Kurdish issue. There is an affiliation, according to Turkey, between PYD and PKK. Turkey sees PYD as a terrorist organization and wants to stop PYD from gaining power in Syria. It sees Syria, the developments, Kurdish developments in Turkey, in Syria as a threat to its domestic stability. On the other hand, PYD is fighting against ISIS and US is allied with PYD. So Turkey is in a situation where whatever they do, they are in a lose-lose situation, which is making Turkish policy towards Syria very inconsistent and making Turkey vulnerable to any threat that might be coming from Syria, such as IS attacks.
Abbas, Vali, do you share that analysis? I was just saying there, in the run-up to that question, you now have the Turkish authorities fighting on three fronts. They're fighting a war against Kurdish militants, they're fighting a war against Islamic State, and they're fighting against the far left. Are they even up to fighting a war on three fronts?
I share some of the concerns and, if you like, and points that which was raised by Zeynep. I think they're correct, but insofar as fighting on three fronts are concerned, it didn't have to be, because on Saturday the PKK declared ceasefire, but the government did not accept that and continued the air attacks on the PKK. And secondly, insofar as Syria is concerned, I think it is the situation even is a lot worse, that ever since that Russia as a major player has entered the scene and now is acting in a rather, if you like, a different way to the Americans. I mean, quite different way.
And of course, the Turkish were warning, the Turks are warning that it's going to create another wave of refugees from Syria into Turkey. Just a final thought from both of you. To you, first of all, Abbas, Vali, how do you see the next few months going if Islamic State are now looking towards Turkey to launch more attacks? You've got elections coming up. What do you anticipate in the coming months with people all around your country asking the basic question, are we safe?
I think if Daesh or ISIL is really forced to a corner in Syria, given the fact that similar situation it seems to be taking place in Iraq as well, it is likely that there will be spillover the border, and we may witness some instabilities and some actions here. But I think the most important event is the result of the elections in November 1st, and what outcome will be there, whether there's going to be a coalition government and who is going to play the major role in the coalition government, and what will happen to the Kurdish question, what kind of provision will
so that is absolutely crucial. That is absolutely crucial, the result of the election. Zeynep, you were nodding in agreement as those points were being made.
I totally agree with Abbas on that. And I also agree the election, the results in June was not satisfactory for AKP. They lost their majority. HDP won 80 seats, which made coalition the outcome of it. And AKP didn't really make much effort to form a coalition government in this process. So these elections coming in November, the people already said what they wanted to say, and this process is creating a lack of trust in the political system in Turkey. So the government, the upcoming government, really has to assure people that it's reliable, it's accountable, and it will establish the democracy and open the peace talks again.
Well, we shall watch over the coming weeks and months. Zeynep Kaya here and Dr. Abbas Vali, thank you very much for being with us on today's programme. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now let's turn to some of the day's other stories. A Somali